Have you ever felt it? That strange, almost invisible thread, pulling someone closer to you even when they say nothing at all. He doesn't. Confess it. He doesn't even seem fully aware of it. And yet, there's a shift in the air when he enters the room, a quiet gravitational pull. His eyes hesitating, on yours longer than they should. His silence doesn't create distance, it builds intimacy. And when he finally speaks, it's as if the words are only a fraction of what he's truly feeling. Carl Jung once wrote that the unconscious does not lie. It expresses what the conscious mind represses, disguises, or cannot yet name. So what if his hesitation is not indifference, but the very sign that something deeper is already happening beneath the surface? What if he is already in love more than he realizes, but doesn't yet have the inner clarity to accept it? In this video, we'll explore what Jung called the symbolic language of the soul and how it reveals itself in unexpected ways through behavior, not promises, through presence, not persuasion. You'll learn to read the unconscious language of love, the small shifts in his energy, the moments of unexplainable closeness, the silence that feels full rather than empty. This is not about guessing games or decoding text messages. It's about understanding the way love operates when it moves from the depths of the psyche before it ever reaches the lips. So stay with me. What you're about to hear might change the way you recognize love forever. Because sometimes it's not that he's hiding how he feels. It's that his soul has already chosen you, and the rest of him is just trying to catch up. The unconscious choice. When his soul recognizes you first. There are moments in life that defy explanation. You meet someone and something within you shifts, not because of what they say or do, but simply because they are there. And if you're intuitive enough, you may sense that this shift isn't happening only in you. His behavior begins to change, subtly, but unmistakably. He pauses before speaking to you. He pays attention when you enter the room. He looks away when caught staring. But ask him directly, and he might have no idea why. Because something is already in motion beyond his logic, beyond his control. Carl Jung believed that our unconscious often knows far more than we consciously admit, that the soul chooses long before the mind catches up. And love, in its most authentic form, often begins not as a choice, but as a recognition. This is the first and most misunderstood sign. Soul has already made the decision, but he hasn't yet translated it into conscious thought. He may seem inconsistent, one moment attentive, the next distant. But if you look beyond surface confusion, you'll notice that his entire energy shifts around you. It's not strategy. It's not seduction. It's resonance. His unconscious recognizes something in you, something familiar, something essential, and it reacts even if he doesn't yet understand what's happening. Jung called this phenomenon projection, where unconscious contents are mirrored onto others. But in rare cases, it goes deeper than that. It becomes a silent alignment of inner worlds. Western culture has trained men to rely on rationality, to avoid emotional depth, unless it can be clearly defined or controlled. Vulnerability, to many, feels like weakness. So when the unconscious begins to stir with real emotion, unfamiliar, powerful, raw, it often creates inner conflict. He may withdraw, not because he's uninterested, but because he's overwhelmed. He may hesitate not because he doubts you, but because part of him already feels too much, and he doesn't know why. So if you've ever wondered why a man seems to circle around you without explanation, why his presence lingers even when his words remain silent, this could be why. His soul may have already made its choice. The rest of him is simply trying to understand it. And the question is, can you stay present with that mystery long enough to let it unfold. The gaze that lingers, what his eyes say when his mouth is silent. There's a kind of look that no man rehearses. It doesn't come from charm, strategy, or timing. It happens when he's unaware you're watching. A momentary pause in his movements. A gaze that softens, then hardens, then softens. Again, as if he's caught between admiration and restraint. And when you notice, it's never just curiosity. It's recognition. Carl Jung believed that symbols and gestures often carry more truth than spoken language. In this moment, his eyes have become the first language of his unconscious. He may not be ready to say it, but something deep within him already feels it. And that feeling leaks out through glances uncontrolled, raw, sincere. This is not the gaze of possession or desire alone. It is the gaze of someone witnessing something sacred, perhaps even frightening. Because what he sees in you is not just beauty, it's familiarity. A mirror, a reflection of something he didn't expect to find. And that is why he often turns away when you catch him looking. Not because he's ashamed, but because the gaze reveals more than he was prepared to admit. Men, especially in the West, are conditioned to control expression, to suppress emotional display. Vulnerability is often seen as a liability, a breach of masculine code. So when his soul begins to recognize someone it deeply resonates with, his instinct is not to confess, but to contain. Yet the truth finds its way to the surface through eyes that hold you for just a second too long. You may find that in a crowded room, his focus breaks only when you leave, or that he listens more attentively than anyone else, even in silence. This is the realm Jung called the symbolic function of the psyche, where unconscious material emerges not as statements, but as gestures and behaviors. When a man's soul connects with yours, his conscious mind may struggle to explain what he's feeling, but his gaze will always betray him, not because he's careless, but because the unconscious doesn't obey rules. And here lies the paradox. The more he tries to conceal, the clearer it becomes. The glance that lingers, the quiet presence that follows. You, the awkward hesitation. These are not signs of confusion, but of transformation. His soul is reacting before his mind can make sense of what's happening. And the question is, will you believe the look in his eyes, even when his words haven't yet caught up? Micro-attention. The way he notices what others miss. Love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes it hides in the smallest movements, the kind that most people never notice. But when a man is unconsciously drawn to you, something shifts in how he pays attention. Not the loud, performative kind of attention that seeks reward or recognition. This is quieter, subtle. He notices that your voice sounds different today, even when you say you're fine. He asks about a book you mentioned weeks ago. He pauses. When you say you're tired, as if searching for what lies beneath the words. These aren't calculated responses. They're instinctive. Carl Jung taught that true emotion always finds a way to express itself through symbols, through involuntary acts that speak louder than intent. And when a man begins to notice the things no one else sees, he is not just observing. He is responding soul to soul. Western culture has trained many men to be distracted, externally focused, chasing productivity and results. But real emotional connection quiets that noise. When the unconscious detects someone meaningful, the mind shifts, focus narrows, and suddenly he starts remembering details here. Usually forgets the exact way you laugh, the way your hands move when you talk, how your mood changes with the weather. These small acts of attention are not evidence of obsession. They are resonance. You've entered his inner world, and now, even the mundane moments are colored by your presence. More importantly, this micro-attention does not demand anything in return. He doesn't notice these things to impress you or gain approval. In fact, he may not even realize he's doing it. That's why it's so powerful. Because attention, in its purest form, is presence. And presence cannot be faked. It arises when his unconscious begins to revolve around yours without explanation, without design. Jung believed that when the soul is touched, it seeks to mirror what it recognizes. That is why this kind of man might show up unexpectedly, follow up on something small you once said, or reference a feeling you barely expressed. He is not trying to decode you. He's remembering you without knowing why. And in those quiet gestures, love has already begun its work. So the question becomes, are you attuned enough to recognize this invisible form of devotion? Emotional disarmament. Vulnerability as a sign of depth. When a man is in the presence of someone who touches his soul, he does not become smoother. He does not become cooler. He becomes undone. That's the paradox. Love, when it is real and unconscious, does not make him more perfect. It makes him more human. You may notice he stumbles over his words. He second-guesses himself. He becomes quieter, or more awkward, or unexpectedly tender. These aren't signs of weakness. They're signs that something deep inside him is no longer trying to perform, it's beginning to feel. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious seeks wholeness, not perfection. And in love, that journey toward wholeness often starts with vulnerability, especially in men who were raised to hide it. Western masculinity has long equated strength with emotional detachment. From childhood, boys are taught to toughen up, not cry, not bet soft. Over time, they learn to guard themselves not just from the world, but from their own emotions. But when he stands before someone who feels deeply familiar to his inner self, that armor begins to crack. Not out of failure, but because it's no longer needed. You may find that he lets his guard down only with you, that he's quieter, more hesitant, even confused, because something inside him is starting to rearrange, and it's terrifying. And yet, he doesn't run. He stays. Maybe not with loud declarations, maybe not with romantic speeches, but he stays. He listens. He opens up slowly, cautiously, because love is no longer an idea or a performance. It's becoming real. It's beginning to ask him for truth. Jung believed that relationships mirror back the unacknowledged parts of ourselves. If he shows you his fears, his failures, or his softness, it's not because he's weak. It's because his soul is beginning to trust yours. He doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be seen. Pay close attention to these moments. They're not always poetic. Sometimes they come as quiet pauses, subtle sighs, or unfinished sentences. But in those cracks, the unconscious is speaking. It's saying, I don't know how to name this, but I feel safe here. And that is the beginning of real transformation. The question is, can you hold space for a man not as he was taught to be, but as he is, when love begins to set him free? Silent protection. When he starts caring without knowing why. There comes a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, when a man begins to protect you without knowing he's doing it. He doesn't announce it. He doesn't dramatize it. He simply starts noticing things that might cause you harm. He asks if you got home safely. He reminds you to eat. He worries when you're walking alone at night. And not because he wants control or because he thinks you're weak, but because something in him has shifted. Carl Jung once said that what the soul loves, it protects. And when a man's soul begins to recognize you as part of his inner world, this instinct to shield you awakens without instruction, without conscious effort. This is not the kind of protection rooted in ego. It's not about being the hero or rescuing anyone. It's subtle, almost inconvenient. He begins rearranging his behavior, making small adjustments, offering small comforts. And often, he doesn't even realize he's doing it. Because at this point, it's not his mind acting. It's his emotional core. Jung taught that the unconscious responds symbolically to what it values, and caring for someone in ways that transcend logic is a powerful symbol of emotional attachment. When he checks in on you without a reason, when he changes his plans to make sure you're okay, he's not performing. He's expressing what his soul has already decided: you matter. In the Western world, men are rarely encouraged to express care unless it's transactional, built around romantic expectation, duty, or traditional roles. But when the unconscious takes over, care becomes something else entirely. It becomes silent devotion, not loud, not polished, but honest. You'll find it in how he asks if you've eaten, not as a routine, but with genuine concern. In how he walks a little closer to your side without thinking. In how your discomfort unsettles him, even when he says nothing. That's not emotional dependency. That's resonance. And this kind of protection, this quiet, consistent concern, is one of the clearest signs that you've entered his psyche. He's not longer only living for himself. His emotional balance is now subtly tied to yours. He wants to see you safe, not because he needs to fix you, but because your presence has begun to live inside his interior life. So the question is, do you see what his words won't say and feel what his behavior is quietly trying to show? You in his absence, how you live inside his mind. The truest test of connection isn't found in how someone treats you when you're near. It's in how their world changes when you're not. And when a man is more in love with you than he realizes, you don't just disappear when you walk away. You stay echoing in his thoughts, stirring something in his emotions, coloring the way he sees everything else. He might not say your name. He might not even realize how often his mind returns to you. But he begins to see the world slightly differently because you've become a presence in his inner landscape. Carl Jung spoke of internal figures, imagined presences that take on meaning in the psyche and begin to guide or influence the individual. When love forms at the unconscious level, you become that figure. Not a fantasy, not a projection, but a psychic reality living within him. You'll start to notice this in small, almost accidental ways. He brings up something you once said long after the moment has passed. He saves stories to tell you later, not because they're important, but because they happened and you weren't there. He remembers details you shared casually, as if they've taken root in his mind. These are not rehearsed behaviors. They're fragments of his new interior world, one that now includes you without needing to explain why. And he may find himself surprised by it, distracted, thoughtful, restless, because what once felt predictable now carries your trace. In Western culture, men are often trained to compartmentalize emotion, to keep feelings in one box and life in another. But the unconscious does not obey those walls. When you've touched a man's soul, you begin to bleed into places he never expected, into his decisions, his reflections, even his silences. He might not admit it, but your absence changes the rhythm of his day. You've become an emotional reference point, and that kind of presence cannot be manufactured. Jung believed that when something takes residence in the unconscious, it begins to shape who we are becoming. If you're present in his inner world without having to demand attention, if your memory appears not just in desire, but in reflection, then something profound has already begun. So the question is, when you're not around, are you still there in his thoughts, in his choices, in the spaces where logic fades and truth begins? Shifts in routine. When love rearranges his world. There's a quiet kind of love that doesn't need to be spoken because it begins to change a man's life from the inside out. You'll notice it not in declarations, but in disruption. His habits shift. His priorities change. The rhythm of his routine, once fixed and familiar, now bends slightly in your direction. Not because you asked, not because he's trying to impress you, but because something inside him has already begun to reorient around your presence. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He wrote that the unconscious, once moved, begins to reshape the conscious world. When a man is more in love than he realizes, his daily life begins to reflect it long before he does. You may see it in the way he adjusts his schedule without mentioning why. He starts making space for time with you, for conversation. With you, even for the silence you bring. Or he begins to include you in his plans almost by accident. I was thinking of going there, maybe you'd like it. 2. These aren't romantic strategies. They're the signs of internal rearrangement. Jung believed that the psyche seeks wholeness through connection. And when a woman touches a man's soul, she becomes a symbolic part of his inner transformation. He doesn't just want you near, he begins to make room for you without realizing it. In Western individualistic culture, men are often taught to pursue autonomy above all, to protect their routines, to defend their independence. But when the unconscious is stirred, that defense softens. He begins to imagine life differently, not in terms of giving something up, but in making something more complete. He may feel uneasy at first, surprised at how naturally your presence fits into places he once guarded. This is not submission. It is alignment. His deeper self is signaling that what he's building no longer makes sense without you in it. These changes can be subtle, but they are persistent. The gym session gets moved. The trip gets postponed. The dinner becomes 2 plates instead of 1. And none of it feels like sacrifice. It feels inevitable. The unconscious doesn't ask permission. It simply begins to act. And if you've started to notice that his world seems to be shifting not dramatically, but steadily, it's likely because his soul is already adapting to love. So the question is, are you paying attention to how his life is quietly making space for you? The mirror of trust, when he shows you his inner world. There's a moment in love that doesn't come with music or grand confession. It arrives slowly, often without ceremony, when a man begins to reveal who he really is, not just the version he shows to the world, but the parts he keeps hidden even from himself. Carl Jung believed that every soul longs for it. Mirror a presence capable of reflecting our truth back to us without distortion. When a man begins to see that mirror in you, something sacred unfolds. He starts telling you stories he's never told, not because he planned to, but because in your presence, the weight he carries begins to lift. His defenses loosen, not through effort, but through trust. You'll notice it in how he speaks about the past, not the curated highlights, but the places of hurt, the mistakes, the regrets, the fears. Not because he wants your pity or needs validation, but because something inside him is tired of performing. And around you, he feels safe. Enough to stop. Jung said that the shadow, the part of ourselves we keep Hidden seeks integration, not rejection. When a man shows you his shadow even. In fragments, it's one of the deepest gestures of love. He is saying, without words, this is who I am beneath the image. Can you still stand with me? In a culture where men are conditioned to be invulnerable, this act of disclosure is nothing short of revolutionary. Western masculinity rewards control, stoicism, self-reliance. To open up is to risk shame. But when love becomes real, that calculation changes. The risk is no longer in revealing, but in hiding. Because hiding begins to feel like disconnection. He may not articulate this, but you'll sense it. He starts asking deeper questions, sharing quiet insecurities, admitting that he doesn't always have the answers. And in doing so, he begins to shed the illusion of who he thought he needed to be. This is not a test. It's a passage. When a man opens his interior to you, it's not because he needs to be fixed. It's because he finally feels seen. And in your presence, he is not diminished. He is humanized. He, no longer needs to dominate to feel worthy. He needs only to be received. So, the question is, can you meet his vulnerability with presence and become the mirror his soul has been waiting for? Wordless defense. How he protects you in your absence. One of the clearest signs that love has taken root is not how someone behaved in your presence, but how they speak about you when you're not around. It's in the subtle ways they stand up for you, defend your name, or correct it. Misunderstanding without hesitation. Not to earn points. Not to impress. But because your well-being has quietly become a part of their integrity. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious responds to what it loves with symbolic loyalty. And when a man defends you in your absence, without being asked, his soul is already speaking on your behalf. You may never hear these moments. You may not even know they happened. A casual conversation. A joking remark. Someone implies something about you and he shifts. His tone changes. His face hardens slightly. Or he simply says, "That's not how she is." It's subtle, quiet, but decisive. Because something within him has claimed you not in possession, but in protection. You are not just someone he cares for. You've become a part of what he values, and that value now shapes his instincts. In the West, where emotional expression in men is often muted or misunderstood, this form of wordless defense becomes especially powerful. It reveals a kind of emotional maturity that doesn't need to perform. He doesn't need a stage to declare loyalty. He simply lives it, even when no one is watching. Jung wrote that real transformation occurs not through conscious effort, but through unconscious alignment. When a man defends you, without realizing why, it is because his inner world has already rearranged around your presence. And this kind of loyalty, this instinctive response goes beyond romantic interest. It's about meaning. You are no longer an external attachment. You are internal, part of his emotional framework. So when someone mocks, diminishes, or misrepresents you, his body reacts before his brain decides. And even if he never tells you, even if the moment passes unnoticed, the truth remains, his love has become protective. This is the kind of love that doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't ask for reward. It's quiet but unwavering. And if you pay attention not to his words, but to how others speak of you in his presence, you may start to see this truth for yourself. So the question is, are you aware of the silent shields he raises for you, even when you're not there to see them? Becoming home. When peace replaces passion. There is a moment in love that rarely gets attention. It's not the rush, not the spark, not the dramatic confession. It's the quiet, the stillness, the subtle exhale a man releases when he's finally with someone who doesn't need him to perform, impress, or pretend. And in that moment, he begins to feel something that goes beyond passion. He feels peace. Carl Jung believed that the deepest connections are not built on intensity alone, but on resonance when two souls no longer feel the need to defend themselves. When a man reaches this stage, he doesn't just desire you. He begins to experience you as home. You'll notice it in how he lingers, not to chase excitement, but because he feels whole in your presence. He doesn't seek escape. He returns. He slows down. He may say less, but mean more. Because love, at this depth, no longer demands language. It speaks through comfort, consistency, and calm. He may start to enjoy the things you love, not because he's changing for you, but because your joy becomes his. He aligns, not because he's losing himself, but because something in him has found the courage to be shared. Jungian wrote that when two psyches resonate, the boundaries soften. It is no longer you and me, but we not as a merger, but as a mutual belonging. In a world where relationships are often judged by how loud they are, this quiet love can go unnoticed. But it is the most enduring because it isn't driven by fear or urgency or fantasy. It's anchored in presence. You may find that he starts choosing you in ways he never says out loud. He checks in without needing a reason. He listens more, fights less. His world slows around you. That is not boredom. That is safety. And safety is where real love begins to grow. So if you see him changing gently, unconsciously, without effort, if you feel that his world bends just slightly to include you, know that something beautiful is unfolding. Not rushed, not declared, but real. Because when the soul has chosen, the mind eventually follows. And when a man no longer needs to impress you to stay, but simply finds peace in your existence, that is, the deepest kind of love he can offer. Now, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, have you seen these signs? Felt this presence? Not in his words, but in the space he creates for you? If so, don't rush it. Don't demand clarity. Trust your intuition. The unconscious doesn't lie. And if his soul has chosen you even before he fully understands it, then what exists is already real. All it needs is time. If this touched something in you, let it sit in silence. And if you feel called to, share your story below. Because sometimes speaking the unspoken can bring two souls even closer.